Hello, Steve here. Welcome to Real Health. Who'd have thought health is about what we're eating? Join me on my quest to disseminate my go-to health regimen, the Health 44, my clumsy branding of eliminating 4 classes of food, introducing 4 classes of micronutrients. Bingo, bongo, health sorted. So thank you for your interest. Let's do this. Welcome again. Today, commentary on the Minnesota Coronary Experiment. Back in those days, 50 years ago, they weren't studies, they were experiments, don't you know? So the Minnesota Coronary Experiment, the MCE, one of those major studies in my list of what I'm covering. I'm not sure if I'll go through the whole list, depending what sort of interest there is. There's no interest anywhere in what I say, but I'm still going to do it. So, the reason why I'm doing it is because there's some controversy there. The pushed ideas of the time was cholesterol was due to saturated fat. They didn't find that. Anyway, so from the top, started in 1968, ending in 1973, the year of my birth. And it was published, the findings were published in 2016. They were sitting on their hands for like 43 years. What's going on there? Many will start spruiking all these conspiracies and this and that. Maybe. But I could just imagine being a fly on the wall and some of their the publishers' ideas. So just under 10,000 participants, and get this, for those that aren't quite familiar with the Minnesota Coronary Experiment, mental health patients or psychiatric facility and a massive nursing home facility in Minnesota. So basically, there was no consent. These two populations had a randomized control. The control was the saturated fat diet, and the what do they call it? The targeted group or the intervention group was the polyunsaturated fats group consumers, mainly of the corn oil type. So from 5 years, they discovered that most of the residents were 65 plus, a few younger ones in there from the mental health place, but basically they found no differentiation from the saturated fat group or the polyunsaturated fat group, the corn oil people, and but there was a increase in mortality in the intervention group, the polyunsaturated group. We needed them. The instigators, the study organizers, the aims were designed to see whether cholesterol, lowering cholesterol, that was achieved, but lowering cholesterol didn't contribute to lower mortality rates. It in fact increased. Well, there was no difference really. In 5 years, it's not too much of a time frame to suggest a good enough longitudinal study of already mostly elderly patients. And you should have gone multiple decades, like some of these studies, like the Harvard Human Development Study and the Nurses Health Study and the Professional Males Health Study, and what's some others? There's the UK Data Bank and all that sort of thing. So only 5 years worth, but they discovered that the difference in the higher mortality rate in the intervention group, the polyunsaturated group, was more cancers. Was that the major reason why they didn't publish the findings? Because They would have had to publish the findings at some point because public money went into the study, the experiment. So I'm not sure what was happening there. You could always assume. I know there's assumers out there. I'm not going to assume for you. But yeah, so the actual numbers was, don't recall seeing the numbers, but it wasn't that slight. It was fairly hefty. 1 or 2% more, it was more like 5% more, but that's enough to be statistically visible, relevant. What's that? Anyway, some of you statisticians will know which nomenclature I'm referring to. So many will jump on this bandwagon where, well, there you go, saturated fat is better. What was their diet before the experiment? Before the saturated people had the saturated fats diet? And how were they inserting the same meal, the same looking meal that was polyunsaturated fat versus saturated fat? That's another, just didn't mix. It just didn't sit with me. Like, how do you make something that that's got saturated fat in there, but it's got corn oil in there to be polyunsaturated? Injected it in. It must have tasted horrible. Or might have improved the taste. I don't know. So that was a bit of a what? Because especially the mental health patients, I'll be thinking, why is yours so different? Mine's looking better, and for another person, it's looking worse. So the time frame wasn't long enough. I've mentioned in a few episodes ago the reason why we have all these different health occurrences and needs for certain illnesses, and well, this sits with me better and this doesn't. I like vegetables, I like meat, all that sort of thing is how we get brought up, how we were born, how we were conceived, and how we were gestated. And so when you're an infant, child, adolescent, you've had different diets, and those elderly patients in the nursing home and the psychiatric patients would have had pretty much highly processed. Even in those days, a standard American diet was still highly processed, and so they all would have had a general baseline of crappy food before the experiment. So if your median population base is 65, and the study goes until the median hits 70. It's not long enough. It's not long enough. There's damage already done, and with 10,000 patients, there would have been some statistical significance. The statistical significance in there. That's a lot of participants. Unsuspecting participants, not ethical these days, and I don't think it was even ethical back then. So yeah, it's just mind-boggling what even only half a century ago we were allowed to do with our psychiatric patients and our elderly patients. So even in that short, not what they wanted in the results, they got the cholesterol down, but there you go. It didn't reduce the mortality, as in cardiovascular risk or coronary heart disease, like they called it in that experiment. More cancer in the polyunsaturated fat intake group. So out of say 5,000 polyunsaturated consumers, fat consumers, polyunsaturated fat consumers, maybe there was 5 extra cancer cases. That's getting on the low side of statistical significance. There was a number in there. Was it 15? But it was a little bit too significant to ignore. So there you go. I think I've made my point where cholesterol did go down, mortality didn't go down regarding the coronary heart disease, as they called it in that experiment. What I suggest, what I prescribe for the world is, I call it the Health 44. I advocate a keto diet. More accurately, if you had to split hairs, I would classify the easiest, the cleanest slate, the easiest job is being heavy keto. So a little bit of dairy in there, eggs, meat, chicken, fish, not overdoing your meat, that sort of thing. And part of what health happens when you do the 44, you need to eliminate 4 classes of food. That's the first 4 of the 44. 90+% of the supermarket. Eliminate glutens, oils, sugars, nitrates, nitrites. Then introduce those the supplements, the micronutrients that we require to supplement with these days, because our food supply chain is stuffed. Those 4 classes of micronutrients. There's 60 minerals, 16 vitamins, 12 amino acids, 2 essential fatty acids. That's the Health 44 in a short time. Cures, improvements, depending on whether you had conditions at birth or not. Birth defects can't really be, they can be lessened. Your birth defects can be lessened, but not eliminated. My eyesight is a birth defect, so that wasn't eliminated, but certainly my weight was eliminated, my chronic issues, my carpal tunnel, my osteo issues, my frozen shoulder, my some osteoarthritis, Hashimoto's was starting to creep in, all that sort of stuff, and gone. Okay, so I feel for the families of the Minnesota Coronary Experiment, without consent and all that. So yeah, a big one. So I'm not sure whether to continue on this path, this series of evaluating, or just quick comments on those wide-scale guideline shaping studies, wide-scale studies that have been done in the past, and a few of them are still ongoing. So am I going to mention the 7-country study, which I often always talk about, which culminated in the Mediterranean diet? I've talked about Mediterraneans and the Okinawans often, and I'm not sure whether I should do that. But anyway, this is just a quick hint. I'm doing a double header this evening, and yeah, I think I've made my point. Coronary experiment, that Minnesota Coronary Experiment, didn't go the way they wanted. They were trying to shoehorn what they felt should be done is to go on polyunsaturated fat. And the tide is seeming to change, particularly with the carnivores and the ketos out there. The vegans are still holding on. I don't deny, discourage people to be vegan, but it's harder. Let's face it, it is much harder. And the easiest way to do it is keto or carnivore, or you can be the opportunistic omnivore, as long as the way Andrew Huberman in the popular press suggests, beef, chicken, fish, eggs, fruit and vegetables. That's it. Water and coffee or tea. That's a good start. But we need to supplement these days. Otherwise, the micronutrients aren't dependable, and you won't be going too far past your octogenarian years. So watch this space into the next half century to see how I go. I'm age 51 now. Let's see if I get into my 90s and to become a centenarian. Let's compare me versus the other. You're not a health guru, they say to me. Fine, let's just compare me and the health gurus out there. Anyway, made my point, and bye-bye.